What if your restlessness, your silence, even your sudden distance from the noise of the world weren't signs of breaking down, but breaking through? In this video, we'll explore 5 subtle but powerful signs that your soul is awakening, even if you haven't realized it yet. Because transformation doesn't always roar. It often begins in whispers. Welcome to Trandy Wisdom, where every story is a mirror for your inner journey. 1. Feeling alone in the crowd, but no longer afraid. You may find yourself at a gathering, laughter echoing, conversation bubbling, plates being passed from hand to hand. You smile, not out of politeness, but because it feels expected. And yet, something within you remains untouched by it all. It's not sadness, nor disdain, nor boredom. It is something far more subtle, a stillness, a distance, a quiet awareness that you are both part of this scene and not entirely within it. This sensation does not begin with drama. It arises gently, like morning fog, rolling across an open field. It does not demand your attention, but it makes its presence known. You may try to brush it aside at first, thinking perhaps you're simply tired or distracted, but the feeling returns again and again. Whenever you are surrounded by noise and faces and expectations, it returns not as a wound, but as a whisper. The whisper says, you are no longer who you used to be. In ancient forests, there are trees that have stood through centuries of wind and silence. If you sit near one long enough, you begin to hear things differently, not through your ears, but through your being. It's not a sound, but a presence. In the same way, when the soul begins to awaken, it speaks without words, and the first thing it says is often a question. Why do I no longer feel at home in the places I used to belong? Spiritual awakening does not always begin with light. Sometimes it begins with space, the spaciousness between one sentence and the next, the pause in your breath when you no longer feel the need to respond, the stillness in a room full of motion, where you are simply watching calmly, kindly, not because you are distant, but because you are present in a different way. This sense of being alone in the crowd is not a failure of connection. It is the birth of deeper awareness. Where you once reached outward for approval, you now turn inward for alignment. You are no longer listening just to respond, or speaking just to be heard. You are beginning to hear life on another frequency, one that requires silence to receive. There was a time when being alone felt like exile. Now, it feels like sanctuary. The aloneness is no longer something to fix or escape. It is something to rest into. You begin to realize that solitude is not about the absence of people. It's about the presence of peace. In a city square, someone sits alone on a bench. Unnoticed, they do not scroll their phone. Do not look around nervously. Do not fidget. Their eyes are soft, watching the wind move through the leaves. A child's laughter passes like birdsong. Somewhere nearby, a siren fades. They breathe. This person is not lonely. They are rooted. And though the world spins loudly around them, so they remain still, not because they are withdrawn, but because they are awake. To be spiritually awake is to no longer chase belonging in places that ask you to shrink. It is to walk through crowds and feel your own presence more clearly than ever before. It is to let the noise pass through you without sticking, without pulling, without shaking your center. There is a profound freedom in no longer needing others to understand you in order to feel understood. You may begin to feel tired of performing, of pretending to be fine when you are tender, of laughing when something in you aches for stillness. You begin to see how much of your past self was shaped by a longing to fit in, and you realize the more you fit in, the more you abandoned yourself. But now, something new is unfolding. The desire to belong is being replaced by the desire to be real. To be real is to say little and mean much, to feel deeply without needing to display it, to smile not to please, but because joy has quietly arrived. You begin to live with a kind of sacred privacy, not secrecy, not withdrawal, but a reverence for what is becoming alive in you. You no longer fear missing out. You no longer force connection. You begin to see that some spaces, no matter how crowded, are not meant for you, and in letting go, you find others where silence is welcome, where presence is enough, where the soul can breathe. There are vast desert plains where silence stretches for miles. Those who walk there do not do so for entertainment. They walk to hear the voice that only speaks when everything else becomes still. That voice has begun to rise in you, and even in the middle of cities, it guides your steps. There is no need to rush this awakening. The feeling of aloneness is not asking you to act. It is asking you to listen, not to others, but to yourself. It is inviting you to know what it feels like to no longer betray your truth for the comfort of familiarity. It is offering you the chance to experience peace that does not depend on the environment, even as others talk over one another, even as laughter rises and falls around you. You remain calm, not distant, not cold, but unattached, watching the moment pass like clouds across a blue sky. Your breath is your anchor. The sound of your own heartbeat becomes the rhythm you move by. You do not need to explain this to anyone. You do not need to justify your stillness. The forest does not ask the bird why it sings. The river does not ask the moon why it glows. Your awakening is its own justification. And yet, you are not retreating from the world. You are simply no longer losing yourself in it. You walk beside others with love, but without losing your step. You speak with kindness, but no longer fear silence. You are no longer grasping for approval. You are remembering that the one person you must come home to is yourself. This shift is gentle. It unfolds slowly, like petals unfurling in early spring. There is no sudden transformation, no lightning bolt from the sky, only the soft, persistent voice that says, "You are here now, and here is enough." When you feel alone in the crowd, remember, this is not the end of connection. It is the beginning of communion, communion with your own breath, your own essence, your own path. You are not lost. You are being found by yourself. And in time, this inner stillness will radiate outward. Others will feel it. Some may be frightened by it. Others may be drawn to it. You do not need to worry. Your task is not to be understood. Your task is to be true, even in the noise of the world. You will carry this silence with you, like a lantern in the dark, like a steady heartbeat in the middle of chaos. You are no longer afraid of being alone, because you are no longer abandoned by yourself. 2. Letting go of the need to control everything. There is a point in the human journey where we begin to loosen our grip, not because we have been defeated, but because we have finally begun to see clearly. For much of life, we reach forward with clenched hands, tightly holding expectations, calendars, identities, and outcomes. We live inside elaborate plans, convinced that if we can control the moving pieces, we will be safe from the messiness of change. But life, like the wind across the ocean, resists our demands for certainty. It moves as it moves, with or without our permission. In the quiet before dawn, in the hush of a room, after the chaos has passed, something begins to shift. We see the cost of our grasping, the fatigue of holding everything together, the weight of being the manager of every detail, the architect of every result. It is then that a strange but tender truth begins to dawn. Control is not peace. Control is resistance wearing a mask of safety. There are moments in the natural world that mirror this truth. Watch a hawk in flight. It does not beat its wings in every direction. It rides the currents. It trusts the wind. A river does not argue with a fallen tree. It moves around it. The earth has always known how to let go. It is only we who have forgotten. Letting go is not the abandonment of responsibility. It is the surrender of illusion. The illusion that we are in charge of how things unfold. The illusion that we can plan our way out of pain. The illusion that if we try hard enough, we can prevent the world from being unpredictable. But the world has never promised predictability. It has only ever promised presence. There is a softness in letting go, not a softness of weakness, but one of wisdom. We stop pushing the river and begin to flow with it. The breath becomes our teacher. Each inhale a receiving, each exhale a release. Life enters, and life leaves. Control tightens the chest. Letting go opens it. Perhaps you notice it when plans fall apart. You had it all lined up. The appointment, the trip, the carefully crafted intention. And then something shifts. A phone call, a cancellation, a closed door. In the past, you may have clenched, resisted, complained. But now there is only a pause. You look out the window. The sky is still there. The birds still fly. The moment is still whole. And you breathe. This is not indifference. This is presence. You are not giving up. You are showing up without the armor. You are meeting life, not forcing it. The practice of letting go begins with small things. The red light that stays red longer than you hoped. The friend who forgets to call. The email that never comes. Each of these is a doorway, a moment to unclench the jaw, to release the shoulders, to say to yourself, this too is okay. And in time, you begin to extend this practice into larger landscapes, loss, illness, the shifting of identity, even death. You meet them with the same breath. This too. There is a tree on the edge of a cliff in the highlands, weathered by decades of storms. Its branches are not symmetrical. Its trunk bends in odd directions, but it stands, not because it has controlled the wind, but because it has yielded to it without breaking. Letting go is not collapse. It is resilience born of surrender. To let go does not mean we do not care. It means we care so deeply that we refuse to cling. A parent lets go of their child, not because they no longer love them, but because they honor their becoming. A poet releases the final word of a poem, not because they are done feeling, but because they know the page must end. In this way, letting go is an act of deep love for life, for others, for ourselves. You may begin to notice a new rhythm to your days, one that is not driven by agendas or outcomes, but by awareness. You begin to ask not, what must I control today? But, what can I meet with presence? You no longer see time as something to conquer, but as something to flow within. You no longer see emotions as problems to fix, but as waves to breathe with. There is immense grace in this way of living. And yet, the world around you may not understand. People may ask why you seem less driven, less attached to results. They may confuse your peace with passivity. But you know the truth. It takes far more courage to let go than to control. It takes strength to trust the unknown, to lean into the moment without guarantees. There will still be days when you want to tighten your grip, when fear arrives uninvited, whispering old stories, when disappointment stings, when plans unravel. On those days, let yourself feel it. Let the tears come. Let the frustration move through. But do not build a home there. Let the emotion rise and fall, like a passing storm. Then return to your breath. Return to the moment. Return to what is real. Letting go is a path, not a destination. You may have to walk it again and again, but each time, it will feel less like loss and more like freedom. You begin to trust that life does not need your constant management to unfold in beauty. You see that the flowers bloom without your permission, that the tides move without your interference, that the heart, once quieted, knows how to guide you. In this stillness, you begin to live differently. You speak slower. You listen more. You make space for silence. You pause before reacting. You breathe before deciding. You allow things to unfold instead of rushing to fix it. And in that allowing, you meet the mystery, not as a threat, but as a companion. What you once called control was often fear. Now, you are learning to live from trust. Trust not in an external force, but in the simple, radiant unfolding of each breath. You no longer believe that you must hold it all together. You believe instead that life is holding you. You are not letting go into emptiness. You are letting go into presence. And so you walk through your days, no longer trying to hold the world in your hands. Instead, your hands remain open, ready to receive, to release, to bless, to be. You are learning the art of release. You are learning the courage of surrender. You are remembering how to live without the need to control. 3. Feeling the pain of others and responding with compassion. There are moments when you walk into a room and feel something has shifted. Before a word is spoken, the energy is heavier. A subtle weight hangs in the air. You look at someone across the table, someone you've known for years, and suddenly you see it. The tiredness behind their smile, the slight tremble in their voice, the way their eyes look away, just a moment too long. You do not ask what is wrong. You do not interrupt the silence with solutions. You simply feel it. An ache that is not yours, but somehow also is. This is how compassion begins. It does not arrive as a grand philosophy. It is not born in declarations of kindness. It begins in the body, as a tremor of awareness, as the heart softens in the presence of pain that does not belong to us, and yet does, because beneath all our differences, suffering speaks in a universal language, and once you begin to hear it, you cannot unhear it. In the high mountain valleys, where snow lingers well into spring, you can find lone deer wandering just beyond the tree line. They move slowly, delicately, sensing the world not only with their eyes, but with their entire being. You cannot walk beside such a creature with noise in your heart. You must match their stillness. Their listening, only then will they remain. In the same way, to truly feel another's pain, you must first be still enough to hold it. There is a difference between sympathy and compassion. Sympathy sees pain and reacts. Compassion sees pain and stays. Sympathy wants to fix. Compassion wants to understand. Sympathy stands at a distance, while compassion walks into the fire without trying to put it out right away. But this is not something we are taught in school. We are taught to avoid pain, to fix it quickly, to give advice, to offer solutions. Rarely are we taught to sit in silence beside it. Rarely are we told that the deepest healing often comes not from words, but from presence. And so we begin this journey by turning toward our own wounds, because we cannot hold space for the pain of others if we are running from our own. We sit quietly with our sorrow. We let the memories rise. We let the grief shake our bones. We do not run. We breathe. We learn to cradle the ache without pushing it away. Slowly, we discover that the heart is capable of being both broken and open at the same time. And from this tenderness, something shifts. The next time we see someone hurting, our impulse is no longer to correct or comfort too quickly. Instead, we feel a deep bowing inside us, a recognition. We've been there too, maybe not in the same story, but in the same landscape. When a friend lashes out in anger, we feel the fear beneath their rage. When a stranger is cold or impatient, we feel the exhaustion that might be driving them. When a child throws a tantrum, we feel the confusion in their small, overwhelmed body, and we do not rush to control them. We hold space. This is compassion, not a sentiment, but a state of being. not an emotion, but a commitment. It is to be deeply rooted in presence, and from that presence, to offer safety. It can happen anywhere, in the line at the market, when someone looks flustered and lost, on the train, when an elderly person stares out the window with moist eyes, at home, when your partner withdraws without explanation. You may not know their story, but you know their pain, and you know it because you have touched your own. There is an ancient tree near the edge of a coastal cliff. Its bark has been stripped by wind and time. Its limbs are twisted by storms, but when you sit beneath it, you feel no bitterness, only a quiet acceptance and a kind of dignity that needs no explanation. Pain, held with grace, becomes wisdom, and this is what compassion invites us into, not pity, not martyrdom, but wisdom rooted in love. The world is full of noise. Everyone is rushing to speak, to be heard, to express. Few are taught to listen, not just with ears, but with presence, to listen in such a way that the other person feels their pain is not a burden, but something safe enough to reveal. You can become this kind of listener. You can become the space in which others begin to feel seen, not because you agree or solve, but because you stay. Your stillness becomes sanctuary. Your eyes become refuge. This is the miracle of compassion. It requires nothing extraordinary, no perfect words, no training, just the willingness to feel deeply and stay open, just the courage to say with your presence, you are not alone. But compassion also has boundaries. It is not about absorbing the pain of the world until you collapse. It is not about fixing every broken wing. It is about becoming a clear lake. What passes through you reflects, but does not cling. You feel, but you do not drown. You stay open, but you remain grounded. This is what allows compassion to endure. Clarity, not sacrifice. You begin to notice that compassion is not always gentle. Sometimes it is fierce. Sometimes it says no, because love requires it. Sometimes it walks away, not out of anger, but because that is what truth demands. Compassion is not about being liked. It is about being true. Still, its root is tenderness, and this tenderness grows in you the more you allow yourself to feel. You may weep when watching the news. You may pause in the middle of the street when you hear a mother scolding her child and feel your own childhood ache. You may find yourself forgiving people you thought you never could, not because they apologized, but because you now understand the pain behind their actions. Compassion softens the lines. It blurs the boundaries between us and them. It turns strangers into reflections. It reveals that the human experience is not so different across bodies and borders and histories, that, underneath the armor, we are all longing to be held, to be understood, to be loved without needing to perform. This understanding is not always comfortable. Sometimes it leaves you raw, but rawness is not weakness. It is the place where real connection begins. When we respond with compassion, we are not only offering healing to others, we are healing something in ourselves. We are breaking the cycle of fear. We are saying, this pain ends with me. Oh, the world may tell you to toughen up, to move on, to grow thicker skin, but the path of awakening asks something else. It asks you to stay tender, to let the pain of others matter to you, to let it move you not into despair, but into deeper humanity. And in doing so, you become a quiet light in a loud world. You become someone others trust, not because you are perfect, but because you are real. You become someone who sees through the anger, the silence, the sadness. You become someone who listens not to reply, but to understand. You become someone who reminds others, by your very presence, that healing is possible, that being seen is possible, that love, even in the face of pain, is still possible. 4. Deep awareness of impermanence. There is a moment when the leaves begin to fall, not all at once, not with ceremony, but gently, silently, one by one. They loosen their hold on the branch and surrender to gravity, spinning through the air like golden whispers. For the observer who is not in a hurry, autumn does not announce death. It reveals truth. And the truth is this: nothing lasts. Everything changes. Impermanence is not a tragedy. It is a law of life. And yet, most of us spend much of our lives trying to deny it. We chase youth as if age is a mistake. We clutch relationships as if love can be frozen. We plan years ahead, as if the future belongs to us. But beneath it all is the quiet, unshakable reality. Everything that arises will eventually pass. This is not cruel. It is clarity. To become deeply aware of impermanence is to begin seeing life not as a possession, but as a gift. You do not own this body. You borrow it. You do not command this breath. You receive it. The people you love, the places you hold dear, even the person you believe yourself to be. None of these are permanent fixtures. They are all temporary arrangements of energy, moving through time like clouds across an open sky. The river teaches this lesson effortlessly. It does not mourn the water that has passed. It does not cling to a single drop. It moves, always, with trust in the direction of life. To live in awareness of impermanence is to live like this, to love fully and release gently, to hold what is here, without needing it to stay. You begin to notice the small disappearances first. A favorite tree cut down, a cafe closed, the way your voice sounds different in recordings than it did years ago, a photo from the past that feels like a postcard from someone else's life. These are not just observations. They are awakenings. Each one invites you to touch the fleeting nature of form. Each one whispers, "Cherish this. It will not return in the same way." But this awareness can also be overwhelming. It brings grief. It brings fear. It shakes the illusion of control that so many of us hold. If everything changes, what can we rely on? If nothing lasts, why love at all? And yet, it is precisely because nothing lasts that everything becomes precious. A flower that blooms for a single day is not less beautiful. It is more. A sunset that lasts only minutes does not lack meaning. It is radiant because it ends. In the same way, your breath, this single inhale, this single exhale, is meaningful, not because it is eternal, but because it is here, now, and never again in the same way. Impermanence gives life its color, its urgency, its tenderness, the fact that your child will grow, that your parents will age, that your own hands will wrinkle. This is not sorrowful, if met with presence. It is a call to return, to be here while you can, to live, not as if you are trying to win something, but as if you are trying to touch everything deeply before it passes through your hands. Walk through a forest in early winter. Notice how the trees do not fight the falling of their leaves. They do not resist the bare branches or mourn what once was. They stand in stillness, accepting the rhythm of the earth. The tree knows what we forget. Letting go is not the end. It is the beginning of another form, another phase, another mystery. This is not just true in nature. It is true in the heart. Pain transforms. Grief softens. Even joy changes its shape. The laughter of today will not be the same tomorrow, not because it disappears, but because it evolves. And in that evolution is beauty. You begin to see that your life is not a straight line. It is a spiral. Experiences rise and fall, sometimes returning in new forms. People leave and return, not always physically, but through memories, dreams, the echo of their influence in your actions. Nothing is truly lost. Everything becomes something else. When you embrace impermanence, you begin to live more slowly. You savor. You pause before speaking. You linger in a hug. You look at someone, not just quickly, but as if seeing them for the last time, or perhaps the first, because you know, truly know, that this exact constellation of conditions will never exist again. The sound of rain tonight is not the same as yesterday's. The way the light falls through your window this morning will never repeat. Even the sorrow you feel today is different from the sorrow you felt before. Everything moves, everything breathes, everything ends and begins again. This awareness is not a burden. It is a teacher. It teaches you to grieve well, to feel loss, not as a void, but as a deepening. When someone you love dies, you do not lose them entirely. You carry their voice, their gestures, their way of laughing in the corners of your being. Grief is not about holding on. It is about carrying forward. It teaches you to release its expectations. When you enter each moment, knowing it is fleeting, you do not demand it to be perfect. You simply meet it with kindness, with curiosity, with presence. It teaches you to soften your grip on identity, on the need to be right, on the stories you tell yourself about who you are and what you need, because all of it, ego, pride, fear, is temporary too, and what lies beneath it is far more enduring. Stillness, awareness, compassion. There is a stone temple in a remote valley that has crumbled over centuries. Ivy now crawls through its walls. Birds nest in its ruins. People once worshipped there with incense and chants. Now the silence worships itself. The temple is no less sacred in its decay. Perhaps it is even more so. Its impermanence reveals its soul. Your life, too, is such a temple. And so you begin to live differently. You stop postponing the joy. You stop saving the good dishes for a future celebration. You wear the clothes that make you feel alive. You speak the truth you've been holding back. You tell people you love them. Now, not later. You walk through each day like a guest in a sacred place. Reverent not because of fear, but because of awe. You begin to see that this ordinary moment is the miracle you were waiting for. Even pain becomes sacred because it, too, passes, because it, too, teaches. You no longer run from endings. You kneel before them, knowing they carry you into the next beginning. The deep awareness of impermanence is not morbid. It is the root of joy, not surface joy, but the kind that remains even when life is difficult, because you know nothing is fixed. Sorrow will shift. Darkness will lift. The cycle will turn again. And with that knowing comes peace. You do not need to hold the world together. It is already moving in perfect rhythm. You only need to meet it with an open heart, with a quiet mind, with hands ready to let go. You begin to understand that the goal is not to build something that will last forever. The goal is to build something that is true while it lasts. And when it ends, you bow. You let it go with grace. You let yourself change. You let life change you. 5. No longer the center of the universe. There comes a quiet shift, not sudden, not dramatic, but gentle and unrelenting. Like the change of seasons. One morning, you look out at the world and realize something has altered. The weight of needing to be seen, to be acknowledged, to be central, has begun to lift. You still exist, still feel, still breathe, but you are no longer the axis upon which the world spins. This realization does not come as a revelation. It comes in the pause before a reply, in the stillness after a difficult conversation, in the widening of your attention. You begin to see others, not as reflections of your own stories, but as sovereign lives in motion. Each person is a universe, each voice a song, composed of experiences you will never fully know. There is a kind of freedom that dawns in that understanding. It is not a dismissal of your own value, but a surrender of your need to be the focal point. You do not vanish. You expand. The boundaries of yourself, once rigid and defined, become more fluid. The lines between I and they soften, not into nothingness, but into something more true. In the desert, there are places where the land seems to go on forever. No fences, no walls, only sky and earth and wind. To stand there is to remember that the world existed before your name was spoken and will go on long after your voice grows quiet. This is not a diminishment. It is a kind of belonging that does not rely on being in control. You no longer need the world to revolve around your mood. You no longer require your narrative or to be the most important in the room. When someone speaks, you do not listen simply to respond. You listen to understand, and in doing so, you step outside the cage of self-centeredness into the open field of connection. For so long, we are taught to shape everything around us into meaning that relates to us. We interpret others' actions through the lens of our fears. We take offense easily. We crave recognition. We ache when we are overlooked. But when we begin to awaken, we see that much of this is a mirage, an exhausting effort to keep the spotlight always pointing inward. Letting go of being the center is not weakness. It is the beginning of wisdom. You begin to notice that the child crying in the street is not an interruption to your peace. They are a being in need. That the driver who cuts you off is not a villain in your story, but perhaps someone rushing to a loved one. That the stranger who ignores you is not rejecting you. They may simply be struggling in silence. This shift in perception changes everything. The trees no longer perform for your admiration. They simply are. The rain does not fall to match your mood. It falls because it must. You are no longer the measuring stick for what matters. And in that release, you become more alive. You stop seeking applause. You stop needing to be right. You stop arranging your days around the image you want others to hold of you. Instead, you begin to live from presence, not performance. There is a mountain lake high above the clouds, where the wind scarcely stirs the water. It reflects everything: the sun, the peaks, the birds flying overhead. But it clings to none of it. It is empty and full at once. To no longer be the center is to become like that lake. You reflect the world. You hold what passes through, but you do not possess. This does not mean you become passive. On the contrary, you act with more clarity when you are not clouded by self-concern. Your actions come from a place of freedom. You speak because truth calls, not because ego demands. You help because compassion rises, not because you want credit. You love because love is what moves through you, not because it validates your worth. You find yourself becoming quieter, not out of fear, but out of reverence. You watch more. You listen more deeply. You allow others to shine. You celebrate their joys without comparison. Their victories do not threaten your value. Their sorrows do not revolve around your guilt. You become spacious. To no longer be the center is to make room. Room for different perspectives. Room for discomfort. Room for mystery. You do not rush to explain things anymore. You do not need to understand everything. You trust that not knowing is sometimes more honest than knowing badly. You begin to bow, not just in ritual, but in attitude. You bow to the sunrise, to the wind, to the pain in someone else's story, to the lessons that arrive wrapped in silence. You bow without needing to be noticed. It is not that you have become less. It is that you are finally no longer trying to be more. In the vast plains where herds of animals migrate each year, you witness a harmony that exists without ego. Each creature moves not to dominate, but to survive, to contribute to the balance of the whole. There is no drama in this system, only deep interconnection. You are not above this. You are part of it. Even the stars, so distant and ancient, do not exist for your wonder alone. They burn in their own time. They fade without permission. They remind you that your life is brief, and that brevity is what gives it brilliance. So you begin to walk more lightly. You speak more honestly. You laugh without needing approval. You grieve without needing permission. You stop proving and start being. And in being, you feel the boundary between self and world grow thin. You see the suffering of others as not separate from your own. You hear the cry of the earth as something sacred, not foreign. You begin to live not just from the skin inward, but from the breath outward. This is what it means to no longer be the center. Not that you vanish, but that you become more fully human. You become a guest in the present moment, a witness to beauty, a steward of tenderness. You may still be wounded. You may still long. But now, your wounds are not the whole sky. They are clouds that pass through. You are no longer trapped inside your pain. You are holding space for it and for others. And the miracle is this: the less you need to be the center, the more love flows through you. Because love does not arise from self-importance. It arises from interbeing, from seeing yourself in others, from dissolving the walls that kept you apart. You no longer seek to be everything. You simply become present to everything. And that is enough. Spiritual awakening isn't a destination. It's a deep remembering, a return to the quiet truth you've carried all along. If any of these signs resonate with you, trust that something sacred is unfolding, slowly, gently, in its own time. Stay with the stillness, honor the shifts, and most of all, keep walking your path, even if it feels uncertain, because the awakening doesn't happen in the light alone. It happens in how you learn to carry that light through the dark. Thank you for being here with Trandy Wisdom. Until next time, breathe deeply, live gently, and listen within.